Check. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala. So, this halaqah we titled it Raising Salahuddin. And, part of this is what should our tarbiyah process be? Number two is what should we be raising our kids upon so that they are able to solve problems? When we talk about salah, yes, we're going to define salah as righteousness. And that is something that is a big mandate within Islam itself. But sometimes we forget what righteousness actually is. That is a quick reminder, but righteousness, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Aminu amilu salihat, right? This is something that should be continuous and consistent. This is not something that is one-off, but rather all of our action should be based upon salah. And so when we say Salahuddin, yes, Salahuddin is someone who revived the religion itself, but at every individual level, they should be reviving the religion within themselves. They should be practicing Islam in every single action of their lives. So oftentimes we equate Islam to just salah and just the ritual actions, for example, fasting and zakat. But in fact, these are just reminders. These are just reasons for, or the purpose of salah and fasting would be for purification of the soul, tazkiyatun nafs. And if we purify our soul, and if we are doing proper salah, proper prayer I should say, then all of our actions, they become salah, meaning they will become something that is righteous. Additionally, one thing I would also like to add about salah, when we say righteousness, it means that we're solving problems based on the Quran and the Sunnah. We're solving problems based on Iman. Before Amal Salih, it comes Iman. Iman wa Amal Salihat. That our action should be based on Iman itself. So today's topic is about not knowledge itself, but thinking. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in numerous places in the Quran will encourage thinking, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will encourage tafakkur and tadabbur. But here's one of the things the reason I'm covering this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be believers based on thinking, not based on blind following, not based on just blind obedience to culture and traditions. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to think through things, and this is essential when for example, within our families, raising the next generation, that they have to think and ponder about every single action that they do. The reason I want to pick this is that when someone picks up their phone and they go on social media, are they thinking or are they blindly following? Are they just going towards, because it's an addiction, they pick up their phone and just start browsing the videos, or just browsing WhatsApp, or just browsing TikTok videos? Are they thinking through this? Or are they just blindly following because everybody else did it, they got addicted to it, it's something that they can return back to, because they're bored. Okay? Or for example, when they're watching something and there's a message that's coming to them, are they thinking through this message or are they blindly adopting this message? So this becomes critical because now every single action we have to base it upon thinking. And in order for the action to become salah, in order for that action to be a righteous action, they have to think through this. Is this solving problem or is this going to create more problems? They have to think through it. Is this what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from me? They have to think through this. Is this something that is based on the values of the Quran and Sunnah? And if it's missing those values, or if it's missing that part, and we blindly follow that and just do what everybody else is doing, do whatever the society is doing, then it tends to be a matter of something that creates fasad. It creates corruption. Okay, last talk, we ended with a few strands within our community that's constricted in thinking. I just want to quickly review these strands. For example, we said the superstition strand. This superstition strand has belief in superstition itself. It doesn't understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds all authority. And so what they do is, for example, they will read things that are not appropriate. They might keep things that are not appropriate. They might even, for those who know, right, they will tie either taweez around themselves, or they will tie knots and have it made for them, and they'll keep it in their houses. And the problem with this is, even if it's Quranic verses on it, sometimes we don't know what in addition to the Quranic verses is added on them. But additionally, Allah is our protector. These things are not our protector. So there's a huge gap within this strand of thinking itself. Another strand is innovation in worship. Then we say that this thing will reward us. Whereas in worship and ibadah, the Prophet ﷺ has shown us everything. And so to go outside of that is superstitious, because they think a reward and religious benefit can come to them, or they can go closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from something that is away from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And every innovation someone practices is a step away from the sunnah itself. Okay, another strand is the literalist strand. They make everything into a very narrow-minded, interpretation of everything. And the problem with the literalist strand is they will follow whichever tradition they were brought into. And so, for example, they will say this is the only aqidah to follow. Everyone else is off the, is not a Muslim. Yeah, so they will pronounce takfir on others. The literalist strand is someone that this is the only rule that can. This can be the only rules in Islam, and we cannot diverge from them whatsoever. Yet, one of the things for us to realize, our history is rich with differences of opinion, to such an extent that you'll find our scholars arguing, but they're only arguing for the sake of academics. And this argument, for example, between Imam al-Layth, who's from Egypt, and Imam Malik, who's from Medina, their writings are fierce against each other. But when Imam Malik's daughter is getting married, Imam Malik is writing to Imam Layth that my daughter is getting married. And because Imam Layth was well-to-do, what does he do? He sends caravan of roses towards him. Meaning these differences of opinion didn't create a dent in their brotherhood. So these differences of opinions were there. They had debates, they had arguments, but they respected each other, and they continue to respect each other. They would even have, and you'll see the same thing, for example, Imam Muhammad from the school of Abu Hanifa and Imam Shafi, who studied under Imam Malik, they will have debates with each other. Yet at the end, they will be very respectful towards each other. So this literalist strand, they have this obsession with fiqh, they have obsession with just following rules, they become dry in spirit, and they don't understand that Islam is extremely comprehensive and extremely broad. Another strand, and we talked about this strand as well, this is dogmatism, it's harshness. And this is harshness in religion, and this comes from the literalist strand, but it's more precise that this is the only way. And what happens because of this is, it becomes self-righteousness. That we are correct, everybody else is incorrect. And again, the problem here is, there's no thinking that is occurring. So what will happen, any scholar who's not from the school of thought, they will lack trust in those scholars. Or their understanding of the religion will be very superficial in of itself. They will lack appreciation of the context and time. And what I mean by that is, and I'm going to make this bigger point later on, that one of the things about thinking itself is that if you are a thinker, okay, you will realize that none of us can become the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? And the Prophet ﷺ took the Quran, and he understood the Quran, and he practiced it according to the context and time and place that he was present in. So when he is in Mecca, for example, the context is widely different. And he practiced Islam in one way. For example, he will say there's no fighting that is allowed. Okay? And in fact, in this moment, the companions are saying we should do something. Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not allowing us to do something? Umar radiallahu anhu will come and ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how come we're not fighting yet? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will say that we are small in number. This context has to be understood. We live in a reality. When we, in the beginning stages of Medina, for example, it's not going to be offensive battles, it's going to be something that is defensive. And so what's happening in this case is that the pagans of Mecca are coming to attack and annihilate Islam. So there will be Battle of Badr, there's going to be Battle of Uhud, Battle of Khandaq. The battles here are defensive in nature. As Islam grows and the Muslims' number increases, the context changes and Iman is being built. And by the way, up until this time, for example, even the verses of hijab might have come. Verses of forbidding alcohol have not been revealed. As the Iman becomes stronger, now we're going to reveal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send down that alcohol is haram. Do not come, well, it's going to be in stages as well. For example, there is benefit in alcohol, but the harm outweighs the benefit. The second level is going to be, do not approach salah while you're in the state of drunkenness. And then the last step will be that this alcohol is a tool of shaitan. Now it's become completely haram. It's najas. And so now it becomes completely haram to drink alcohol. So these things are coming in stages based on the level of Iman that everybody has. Now here, we will say someone will become, accept Islam, or brand new practicing Islam, or even our youth. Sometimes we give them the later level of practice. And it's not that these are not fard or not haram. And of course alcohol is haram. Of course hijab is fard. But sometimes we didn't do the base level and foundational work to allow those things to happen. Nobody here wants their kids to drink alcohol. But sometimes, for example, we're talking about smoking, and we're talking about music, and we're talking about all these other issues. But we're not thinking about the fundamental issues that will create them the level of Iman where they are going to be able to think through it themselves. I have heard teenagers say, if I wasn't a Muslim, I would try drugs. Right? And this is something like, are they not thinking at all? Do they not understand the harm of it? But if you build proper level of thinking, they're not thinking if I'm Muslim or not Muslim. They're looking at it that this thing is haram for a reason. Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making this haram? Because it's harmful. It's not just a random rule just to test us. But Allah has made things that are harmful to humanity, haram upon humanity as well. Or something that is fard. There's immense amount of benefit for humanity within these things. We just don't understand it, or we didn't contemplate about it, or we didn't think about it whatsoever. Okay, I want to come to, I went through a little bit of Juz Amma. And look at the verses. Let's look at the verses that are encouraging thinking. And so, Surah Naba, okay, it comes to a point where people are making mockery of the Day of Judgment itself. Amma yatasa'alun. What are they asking about? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kalla saya'alamun. No, soon they will find out. But the question about the Day of Judgment is a question about thinking. Okay? I'll come to this point in a moment. What are we supposed to be thinking about? But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes through this track of showing different creation created with a purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alam naj'al al-arda mihada wal-jibala awtada wa khalaqnakum azwaja. Meaning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, look at the sun, siraja wa haja. Look at the sun, how it provides light and heat. Look at the mountains, how they are awtad, meaning there are pegs in the ground. Look at the earth. Alam naj'al al-arda mihada. Did we not create the earth as a like a cradle for you, something where we are secure and safe, where the earth is protecting us from solar radiation, protecting us from asteroids, protecting us from so many different things. And for example, Surah Nazi'at, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even for example, Fir'aun, the arrogance of Fir'aun, is he not thinking through? Why do human beings think they are so great? Okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا أَمِ السَّمَاءِ? Are you a greater creation or the heavens itself? Okay? So, for example, if you really want to think about this, if we take the whole universe, the universe that is observable to us, this universe of the Big Bang, okay, we gotta say the whole universe, as a scientist will say, this is 900 billion light years wide. Okay? But within this universe, when you look down to the Milky Way, it's just a speck. And each galaxy, by the way, have millions and millions of stars. And Milky Way is just a speck in the grand scheme of things. Zoom into the Milky Way. The solar system is just a speck. Zoom into the solar system. The Earth is just a speck. Meaning if you have a satellite all the way out to Saturn, you cannot see the Earth. Zoom into Earth, meaning you're on the satellite itself, the ISS. You're on the space station. Look onto the Earth. You can't see the human beings. You can't even see a single human being. You can't see the creation. Someone made it up that, oh, you can see the Great Wall of China. You can't see that from the space station. You can't see the Burj Khalifa. You can't see the pyramids. Even the creation of human beings are insignificant. And so, are we thinking about these things? Is Fir'aun who's saying, I'm so great, this people who, our youth, our young Muslims, or ourselves who become so arrogant, are we thinking how Allah's bigger creations are? Meaning there are suns, there are 100 times bigger than our sun. There are stars that are 100 times bigger than our sun. So, another one. Min ayyi shay'in khalaqa. The Quran will always remind us of this. What were you created from? On one side, look at the grand nature of the heavens. Well, look at human beings themselves. From what are they created from? From a nutfa, right? From a drop of fluid, a dirty drop of fluid. Right? And then what happens? Did we develop ourselves? Did we grow ourselves? This is the thinking Islam or the Quran is encouraging here. Same surah, Surah Abasa. فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانِ إِلَى تَعَامِ. Let mankind look at their food. We have this food right here. What is required? Can any one of us make this food ourselves? We can cook it, we can heat it, we can boil it, but we can't create the sun. And the sun is essential for plants to grow. And here's the amazing thing, the plants themselves, it's not like the soil depletes when the plants are growing, right? The plants is using the sun so it can pull in the carbon dioxide, expel the oxygen, and it basically is made of carbon itself. And isn't that an amazing miracle itself? But are we thinking? Another surah, for example, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ. Curse upon those who cheat. And I'll explain what's the cheating here. الَّذِينَ إِذَا اتَّالُوا عَلَى النَّاسِ يَسْتَوْفُونَ. They are cheating and shortchanging when they give to the people. So I'm going to, in that short change, I'm not going to tell you what's the problem in my car when I sell you the car. I'm going to hide these defects. But are you thinking through? وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ أَوْ وَزُنُوهُمْ يَخْسِرُونَ. When they are weighing, they are shortening it. يَخْسِرُونَ. وَأَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ. So, الَّذِينَ إِذَا ابْتَالُوا عَلَى النَّاسِ يَسْتَوْفُونَ. When you ask for your right, you want the full. You want your full right. But when you give the right, what are you doing? يَخْسِرُونَ. You're shortchanging it. And here's the thing. It's wrong because when you demand your right, you want 100%. So shouldn't we give the 100% to the others as well? This is about thinking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making a very logical argument here. We have rights, we have responsibilities. We are taking our rights in 100%, but we're not giving the responsibility 100%. All right, another set of verses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ مِمَّا خُلِقَ. So saying again, going back to Surah Abasa, but from a different angle. خُلِقَ مِن مَاءٍ دَافِقٍ يَخْرُجُ مِن بَيْنِ الصُّلْبِ وَالتَّرَائِبِ. What are you created from? A dirty fluid that is expelled. Okay. Let's look at another verse. سَبِّحِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ الْأَعْلَى. Okay. Glory to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High. الَّذِي خَلَقَ فَسَوَّى. Who created us? Again, a matter of thinking here. الَّذِي قَدَّرَ فَهَدَى. Who formed us? Who determined everything for us? This goes back to Surah Abasa, meaning our entire growth, our entire life journey is going towards the grave, and really, we cannot hold our age back. We cannot hold our growth back. We cannot hold our hair from graying, our hair from balding, right? We cannot do that. We have no control over that. We cannot control our bodies from eventually declining. It will go to the fullest extent, but then eventually it will decline. Here's another verse. أَلَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُ عَيْنَيْنِ. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not give you two eyes? وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَتَيْنِ. He gave you a tongue and two lips. Not the plant two lips, not the flower, two lips. Okay? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَهَدَيْنَاهُ نَجْدَيْنِ. He gave us guidance of the two things. Meaning we're able to tell difference between the right and wrong. This intellectually is present within us. We're able to determine things that are right, things that are wrong. All right, going to a little bit different angle here. What's the purpose of the Quran? Okay, and the reason I want to pick on this, and it's related to thinking, because some of us, we have taken the thinking outside of the Quran altogether. We're saying we need to recite the Quran. And I'm not going to say that's bad. Of course it's good. We need to memorize the Quran. Not bad, it is good. But what's the true purpose of the Quran? Okay? And that requires thinking to understand it. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again I took these verses from Juz Amma only. So really think these things are universally repeated throughout the Quran. وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّى. The blind man comes, right? Abasa wa tawalla. The blind man comes, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminding him that perhaps he would purify himself. أَوْ يَذَّكَّرُ فَتَنْفَعَهُ الذِّكْرَى. Or he would be reminded, and he would benefit from the reminder. How would he benefit from the reminder if he's not understanding it or thinking about it? What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referring to here? He's referring to these verses of the Quran itself. Okay, let's go to the next surah. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. This Quran, it is indeed a reminder to mankind. ذِكْر. لِمَنْ شَاءَ مِنْكُمْ أَنْ يَسْتَقِيمَ. Whoever wants to take the straight path. Meaning, some people will read the Quran, they will never understand the straight path, and they will never get on the straight path. But those who are truly reminded, okay, I need to understand this, and again, the reminder here is, I need to understand this message. They will come on the straight path. If I read these verses without any understanding, I will never come on the straight path. I'm reciting the Quran, but there's a greater objective of the Quran, that we're understanding it. Now when we recite it with understanding, these constant reminder that is coming to us. But understanding precedes recitation. Another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَذَكِّرْ إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُذَكِّرٌ. Remind them, indeed you are a reminder. لَسْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِمُسَيْطِرٍ. Meaning there's no force or compulsion in this religion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending a prophet as a reminder. A Quran that is a reminder. And there's no force upon anybody to follow this religion. Meaning this religion is for the thinkers. Those who are able to think through it, they will come to us. They will come to the righteous path. They will come to the Sirat al-Mustaqim. Those who don't think through it, They will put this, oh, this is just a random book. They will not understand that this book is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And so think about it, going back to Abasa wa Tawalla, where this one man, the blind man, is coming to seek, whereas this other man who has istighna, the one who is always seeking wealth, he has self-sufficiency. He doesn't want to understand the message of the Quran. He doesn't even want the benefit of the Quran. I know I have my own message, I have my own values, I have my own principles. So they're not listening to understand it. Sometimes the blockage within our thinking is our bias, our own upbringing, and so we come to the Quran with a bias in our mind. Okay? So for example, someone who only studies leadership, is so passionate about leadership, they're studying leadership. So they come to the Quran, what's the bias that they come with? The leadership bias. So now, oh, this book is about leadership. They're taking up leadership lessons, constant leadership lessons. Another person who has a scientific mind, they come to the Quran with a scientific mind. They didn't remove that bias. What will they take from the Quran? Oh, this is a book of science. And they'll only read science into it. So the rich people, oh, this book has nothing to do with money. So they will never take the right message away. By the way, those who are studying leadership, they need to come to the Quran removing that study. Those who are studying psychology, they need to remove that, come to the Quran fresh. So your thinking is also fresh. We're going to come to these points as well. Okay, couple of points here. Sometimes a problem that within our community, within ourselves, we take the Quran as something, or not just the Quran, but Islam itself, something for feelings, to create mood. And there's no understanding behind this. And so there's singing, there's poetry, and even the recitation. But we didn't understand the recitation. But we try to get moved by it. So we'll cry, or we'll get emotional. Even the speeches, some people are just looking at the speeches as something that is motivational, but they didn't try to understand it. Oh, I was inspired by it, but they don't really understand it. Then you ask them, what is one thing you learned? They didn't really learn anything. They're just inspired by it. I think it was Abdurrahim Green who mentioned the Coca-Cola Muslim. You guys heard of Coca-Cola Muslim? Okay. The Coca-Cola Muslim is the Muslim, what Coca-Cola, right? You shake the bottle, you open the bottle, everything explodes. What's left? A little bit left. The content is a little bit left. Okay? But everything is the emotions, it just came out. But the reality was left in the end. Very little. And so that's where we're aiming. This is a problem within our community. We're always looking for emotional rushes, iman rush. But what is really required is we have to be able, what is Islam? Even though, we're disturbed by something, we don't have conviction upon it. Islam is submission. We're going to come to submit it. But before that is the full understanding. Who is this command coming from? If it's coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's no dispute at this point. Because you have understood Allah is the greatest, Allah is most high, and Allah knows how He has created you. If a hadith comes to you, Abu Bakr said about Isra wal Miraj, فَإِنْ قَالَهَا فَصَدَّقَهَا. Right? If he said it, then it is the truth. So amazing hadith comes to you. Okay, pause for a moment. Okay, I know if the Prophet ﷺ said it, it is the truth. Now you can go and confirm, did the Prophet ﷺ say it? Is this an authentic hadith? You can do our research. But it's not automatic denial, but rather it is that this reality that we have understood that the Prophet ﷺ is coming with something that is beneficial for us. And of course, there's a lot of work that we need to do to come to that conviction. There's a lot of thinking that's required to come to that level of conviction. But going back to it, once you understand the manners of the Prophet ﷺ, since he was a child until the age of 40, he never lied. If he never lied about tiniest of things, he's known as Sadiq al-Amin. Do you think he will lie about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is far greater than any of the tiniest things? If you understand this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I think Surah Ma'arij, that I swear, and by something that you see, وَمَا لَا تُبْصِرُونَ. تُبْصِرُونَ وَمَا لَا تُبْصِرُونَ. There's certain things that you see. You see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. You know his character. This is thinking. But then, مَا لَا تُبْصِرُونَ. There are certain things you don't see. How the revelation comes down to. For us, intellectual, the thinking that's required, what do we see here? What we see here is the Prophet ﷺ, not only was he the best in character, he fully believed in whatever he taught. Right? So it's not like he's going to say, go pray the night. Rather, he's going to be the first one to establish the tahajjud. Not that I'm going to pray 1/3 of the night, the minimum. No, he's going to do the maximum amount. And so you see a man who is fully convicted in his own thing, and it's impossible except that a prophet would do it. And then look all around you. Look at all the other leaders. Look at the faults within them. Think about the Prophet ﷺ. You're going to go to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ point on your chest, and this is a battle. And you're going to say to the Prophet ﷺ, you hurt me. What would the Prophet ﷺ do in this moment? Okay, take your revenge. Here's my shirt. Take your revenge. Right? And this is a commander. Would a commander, a general of the armies, would ever do that? So his character is different. So someone who is thinking, they would come to this conviction that this man can never lie. And so they will always come back to this, that whatever he said is the truth. But again, there's level of thinking that's required, that I need to understand, did the Prophet ﷺ actually say this? Is this an authentic hadith? Or is this a mawdu? Or is this a fabricated hadith? And once you realize, oh, it's in Bukhari, okay. Bukhari, let's say for us, we generally accept Bukhari. The scholars can argue about the nuances of it, but Bukhari was so meticulous that all the Sunni scholars have agreed that this is the most authentic book after the Quran. And by the way, think about just a little bit more, okay? Because this is about thinking. Do you think any human written book can be perfect? So Bukhari will have some problems. Okay? This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made all other books. The only book that will have no problem is the Quran itself. Besides that, all other books will have some problems. There will be some mistakes. Okay? Because there are human efforts. Okay? Imam Malik, for example, rahimahullah, he wrote the Muwatta, meaning his hadith collection. And it's not just hadith, that's why it's not under the Sahih Sitta, because it compiles hadith, athar of the Sahaba, athar, the statements of the Tabi'een, and so forth. Now, he spent 10 years writing this book. And then for 30 years he taught this book. He started with 4,000 hadith, and he kept on cutting them out, kept on cutting it out, kept on cutting it out. He's refining his book until he's a little bit less than 1,000. This is Muwatta Imam Malik. And yet, after 30 years of refinement, are you going to say this book is perfect? No. Scholars will still find mistakes. But he's putting this effort in. What do we have to think? Yes, we came. Allah is perfect, therefore the Quran is going to be perfect. Human beings are imperfect, so anything that they write, yes, we take as much benefit as possible, but there will be some mistakes in there. This is the level of thinking that is required. But going back to the main point, Islam is not there to create mood. It's not there to create feelings. It's not there to create rush. It's about submission. Islam itself means to submit to whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you. So even though you did not fully understand the benefit behind a commandment, but you understand it's coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're able to think through it, okay, I'm going to submit. But I will make the attempt to understand it even more. Another issue is philosophy of science itself. Some people say science is very problematic. Some people will say science is perfect. The problem is that we need to think through it properly. What is science? It has an area. And certain areas don't belong in science whatsoever. What's the scope of science? Scope of science is very little. And the scope of science cannot be taken to the fullest extent. So think about it. Scientists who are in cosmology, they don't know anything about biology in all essence. Right? Their scope is different. But they want to make full assumptions without remaining in their field. So one of the critical lessons for us to take. So actually, first of all, scientific methodology is not problematic if you keep it in its goal and in its focus. The problem becomes is when we leave that focus and we start applying science to it. So for example, and this is the level of thinking that's required, that some of the scientists will say, okay, we can't see whatever we see is see, or this is what it is. But then they'll start making judgments about the unseen. Okay? And here's the thing, can we see beyond this universe? Just this one universe, the science, I want to say these are physicists, are more philosophers. They'll say, oh, there's multiverse theory. There are so many other universes. But how did they know? There's no scientific methodology there. Or there's nothing beyond this universe. How do they know? There's no scientific methodology to determine that. So one of the things we need to do, whatever our scope is, we need to stay within this scope. The reason that we go outside that scope is arrogance itself. Arrogance pulls us outside what our scope is. Oh, I know enough, so I need to go outside the scope. Philosophers will do this. The scientists will do this. But as Muslims, what do we need to do? Remain in that scope, remain in that field. And so this is a level of thinking. Don't read medicine into the Quran. Don't read science into the Quran. Don't bring other things and read to the Quran. Take the Quran with your own fresh eyes, without any glasses in front of us. And yes, there will still be bias, but understand what your bias is to begin with. Okay, another thing. What is the objective of science? Okay? And so, for example, the objective of science is to create convenience. Put a third eye in your hand so you can see the world from a third eye. But the science never trains you in the proper morality, right? On how to actually live with that third eye. Okay? And so, for us to use that two eyes, is within our innate nature, it's within our fitrah. We all know how to automatically do so. But what about that third eye? We don't know how to use it. And so what happens? The science does not tell you that this will be harmful, this will be beneficial. That's not the scope of science. The scope of science is, let's erect a building, let's put this technology in your hands, and use it however you want. But we never created values and principles on how to use it. It just creates you power, and what happens? Majority of the people abuse that power, hurting themselves, hurting others as well. Okay. Things that come, the wrongful thinking, where does it come from? Okay. Sometimes it's our own culture. Sometimes it's our own tradition. Really think about it. Even from an Islamic standpoint, we might follow a tradition, but isn't Islam really comprehensive? Right? And we have this wide range of scholarship, each thinking independently. Just around Imam Malik, and at the same time you have Abu Hanifa in his time. You have Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, you have Imam Sufyan, you have Imam al-Awza'i, you have Imam al-Layth, big scholars, and their madhab didn't even get preserved to our time. We have 4 madhab that's preserved to our time, but just in Imam Malik's time, we will say Imam Abu Hanifa is more, spiritually pious than Imam Malik. We say Imam Sufyan al-Thawri has more hadith memorized than Imam Malik. So you have this wide range, and there's a lot of disagreements, although there's agreements there too. Okay? So we have this wide range of practices itself. We have a wide range of cultures. So how can we say, if you brought up in a certain culture, that this culture, this tradition is the right tradition where everything else is wrong? Okay? So this is a barrier, a curtain that falls within our thinking. Another one, our goals and objectives themselves. okay, that we're chasing money, we're chasing power. So that's a curtain. Okay? Or the education system. It creates this indoctrination that drops a curtain in front of our eyes. So we don't think clearly because there's a level of indoctrination that's happening. For example, you guys went through high school, social 30. What will they say in social 30? Which is the only system that works? Sorry? Democracy, right? The only other system that works alongside with democracy, capitalism. If I attack capitalism, what will the majority of these students say? You're a socialist. You're a communist. As if there can be no other system. You see the indoctrination that's happening. Right? And this indoctrination, so now young Muslims are going through this because they didn't think through it. They will never realize Islam can build a system too. And by the way, Ibn Khaldun, Shah Waliullah, and Uthman Donfodio, they've built systems. Right? Everywhere Ibn Khaldun will go, first he might enter the prison, but later on they will, oh, this is Ibn Khaldun. So the king will call them, say, okay, look at my law books. Okay? Ibn Khaldun created a system on how to run the economy, how to run a civilization. Okay? Shah Waliullah, for example, built a system on what is called irtifiqat. Anybody knows what irtifiqat is based on? Okay? Ra, Fa, Qaf. Rifq. Okay? And he coined this term. But what is rifq? Gentleness, kindness, rahmah. So instead of profit maximization with capitalism, instead of freedom maximization with liberalism, what is this about, our Islamic system? Based on gentleness and kindness. We're here to spread peace. We're here to, bring moderation. We're here to be, rahim to each other. And so we didn't think through their other system, that we didn't think through what Islam actually is. Islam is a full deen. It's for every area of our life. Another barrier that comes in thinking, which is copying, blind following. Okay? As if our teachers can never make a mistake. Right? And the only person who can be perfect, not that he can't make a mistake, is Prophet ﷺ. But his mistakes, Allah corrects it. But the Prophet ﷺ himself takes the Quran, pulls out the lessons, and applies it. So we said Abasa wa Tawalla, right? But go to the previous surah, Nazi'at. What did Allah tell Musa alayhi salam to do? Idhab ila Fir'aun, innahu tagha. Go to Fir'aun, he has transgressed. What is the Prophet ﷺ doing in Surah Abasa? He's going to turn away from the blind person, but he's still following the Quran. Right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, go to Musa alayhi salam, go to the Fir'aun. He has transgressed. The Prophet ﷺ is going to the transgressors of his time. But in that conversation, he turns away from the poor person. He turns away from the blind person. And so Allah sends him a reminder. Don't turn away from them. Don't frown and turn away. Abasa wa tawalla. He frowned and turned away. Not even you frowned and turned away. Allah corrects the Prophet ﷺ in a third person manner, to make it very light. He frowned and turned away. Who frowned and turned away? Then the Prophet said, okay, well, that was me. He takes the lesson from this. But look at this. The Prophet ﷺ is applying the lesson of the Quran. If he makes some mistakes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala corrects his mistake as well. But what do? We blind copy someone. This blind copying leads to a lot of issues outside of religion itself. For example, the brands that we buy. Why do certain people buy certain brands? Is it because of functionality or because it's a brand? You don't really think about it, right? You're blind following the society itself. Everybody else is doing it. How come I can't do it? And as parents, and as someone who's going to become a murabbi, what we need to do is don't blind follow. Really critically think, where are you guys going to eat? McDonald's. Where are you guys going to eat? This fast food. Not realizing how unhealthy it might be. What are we going to eat? Pizza. Not realizing it's just junk food. Okay? Limited is okay, but then that's the same food everybody demands. And so the problem becomes is we're not thinking, we're just going with the grain. Everybody else is doing it. And they sold us. And think about all this advertising industry. They sold us. It's about convenience. And so we bought into that convenience and we forgot about the health of ourselves. And so there's just the brand and food and clothing in our cars and all of those things, neglecting thought and critical thought behind all of those things. So the goal of the Quran is to come and shock you. The goal of the Quran is to remove these curtains, the curtains of the society. Within our society, for example, right here is a society of science, society of liberalism. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to cut this off. This society will teach us you are an individual, meaning you are completely independent. So they'll constantly talk about independence. Have you ever been independent? Where do you get your food from? Here, look. فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَى تَعَامِ. Look at your own food. You don't farm. You have systems where farming happens, system of distribution, system of selling middle people, system of people who cook, system of people, and we consume. Right? System of people who sell the seeds. There's a whole system behind it. We are dependent. From the moment we are born, we're dependent on our mothers. And so someone will get married and the fighting is happening. We're supposed to be independent. But there's dependencies within the family. The husband has to depend on his wife. The wife has to depend on her husband. And so this dependency is required. But the modern day society is saying, you're independent. But again, Islam wants you to break through this social constructs and think on your own. Okay. So we have to be able to see beyond boundaries. Even for example, the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, they really disagreed with Abu Hanifa in a lot of places. So what did Abu Hanifa really create? He created thinkers. Okay? And Abu Hanifa had no problems for his students to disagree with them. Imam Shafi rahimullah, he studies with Imam Malik for 10 years. And then he asked his permission. Can I go study under the students of Imam Abu Hanifa? Imam Malik says, no, stick to my school. Imam Malik actually gives him permission. After 10 years of studying under Imam Malik. So, to be able to break out of a tradition, grow, and then think independently. And this is something that our scholars themselves encouraged. When you ask Ali radiallahu anhu, what was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam like? And previously I said, Aisha said something, right? This one, Ali. What did Ali say? كَانَ دَائِمًا فِكْرًا. He was always in deep thought. Alongside with that, what came? مُتَوَاسِلًا أَحْزَانًا. The Prophet ﷺ was always in the state of thinking. Alongside with that, what comes? Pain and grief. Because when you're a thinker, you understand the problems within the society. And now concern starts to arise. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ is so, meaning, this is the Prophet who's always concerned for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will describe it in the Quran, Harithun alaykum, worried for you, concerned for you. Why is he concerned for you? He's constantly thinking. He's like, if I don't save them, if I don't teach them, they will enter the hellfire. And he's always changing his strategy. I'm going to teach them this way, I'm going to teach them that way. Exactly what Nuh alayhi salam and Surah Nuh is teaching the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Okay, I had some strategies, but I have one more point that I wanted to cover. One of the things that we need to base our thinking on, and this is my last point for this, okay? What makes thinking pure is to understand the human nature itself. Human nature is comprised not just the physical self. Right now in this society, we say it's just the physical self. Those who are parents here will say, our kids, we're worried about their bodies. Are they eating? Are they not eating? In this weather, we're going to say, are they wearing their jackets? Are they not going to wear their jackets? I'm going to yell at my kid, put on your jacket, zip up. Right? That's what I'm going. My concern is going to be physical concern. Let's take a step up. Also, have you eaten breakfast yet? Have you packed your lunch yet? Okay, take it to the higher level. You're going to worry about the grades. Why do we worry about the grades? Well, school has nothing to do with intelligence. School is about building a profession. Get good grades in ninth grade, get into the right high school. Get good grades in high school, get into the right program in a university. Get good grades in the university so you can get the right job. Nothing to do with I want to say intelligence, but more about indoctrination, that you think in this way. And it's necessary in a profession, it's required. You don't want a doctor thinking like an engineer, right? Especially like an IT person who can turn this on and off. You can't just turn a human being off and turn it back on. That's not going to fix the problem in the medical field. Okay? So indoctrination is required. But the education system, where is it leading? Profession. Why do we want them to have a right profession? So they can earn money. Why do they want them to earn money? So they can feed themselves, so they can have shelter. Again, we're just meeting the physical need. But human beings are made of other aspects as well. One of them is the ruh itself. Human beings have a spiritual need. One of them is the mind itself. They have intellectual needs. One of them is the nafs. They have a psychology. How do they speak to themselves? Do they get addicted to things? How do they free up from their addictions? For example, nafs al-ammara bisu is always commanding them to do a wrong thing because there's an aspect of addiction with themselves. Or are they speaking to themselves in a positive way? How this is your nafs, this is your psyche. And so, what about your emotions? Are they confident, or are they able to deal with stress? Are they able to deal with depression? So we don't look at people holistically. Same thing, and I want to connect this with science, right? Science looks at this narrow thing, but it wants to apply to everything. Okay? Same thing here. We want to look at the jism, we want to make that the solution to everything. Oh, go clubbing, that will fix you up. Go entertain yourself. Go listen to music, that will fix everything. So we're using physical means to solve the problems, but we're not thinking in the big picture. One of the things we need to come down to is the purity of intelligence is to come down to recognizing our blessings that we have. And if we recognize all the blessings that we have, then we will start to recognize a Rabb that is taking care of us. And thinking under that scope will correct our thinking. Thinking outside that scope, outside the scope of rububiyyah, that there's a caretaker, there's a sustainer. Simple thing, our hearts are beating right now. Who's causing our hearts to beat right now? What's causing it to beat? We can't explain it. Electrical signals? From what? Start putting shocks. Is that going to be life in the body itself? What's causing that? What's causing the intestines to work? What's causing the kidneys to work? What's causing the liver to work? What is causing all of those things to work? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, قُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ. He is an authority, an active authority on everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is present. So our thinking has to be under that. And now our thinking starts to become more and more pure. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate mover, if He's moving everything, so alongside with us doing our part, meaning you can't expect a job to come to you, right? You can't expect that. You have to send in your resume. And once you send in your resume, if you get called for the interview, you can't expect to just show up anyway, anyhow, or not even show up and expect the job to come. This is on my resume, this should hire me. You have to do our part, we have to go to the interview. But between that and the ultimate truth, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has authority over everything. He is Al-Qadir. There are hearts that are moved. There are intricate connections that are happening. We don't see it, but those things are there. So alongside with us doing our part, we need to put trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to do dua of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our thinking becomes corrupt because arrogance, oh, I'm so awesome, I'm just going to go and do it. And who knows, this person might be just having a bad day, the interviewer having a bad day, and this fight is happening in Israel and Palestine. I shouldn't say fight, genocide that is happening, but they're sided with different things. They see you as a Muslim, they're like, no, we don't want to hire this person. They don't say it in your face. But who can change their minds internally? Who can change their hearts? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say their hearts in between Allah's two fingers. So Allah is the ultimate power behind all of that thing. And so with our thinking, we need sound knowledge, we need piety, we need patience. What we need is to have full feeling and understanding of Surah Al-Fatiha. This is the natural state. Once you have achieved this natural state, that we have removed arrogance from us. And so this is why we'll say, Iyaka nasta'een, we need your help. This is why we're going to say Bismillah. You know what Bismillah means? Oh Allah, help me in this act. It's not just the act of seeking barakah from Allah, but oh Allah, isba' al-isti'ana. Oh Allah, help me in doing this. As if to say, when the Prophet saying, when you stand up, say Bismillah. When you sit down, say Bismillah. When you wake up, say Bismillah. When you go, meaning even in standing up, yeah, say Bismillah. Do you know that your legs might work or might not work? Have full reliance and seek assistance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you sit down, say Bismillah alongside with that as well. Okay. I will continue different aspect next week, inshallah, beyond this thought, build up upon it even more. How does proper thinking lead us to moderation? How does this proper thinking lead us to the right results? What is that? It's too vast to say how do we correct our thinking. One thing is, of course, come down to the human element. If we have the right heart, if we have the right fitrah, if we have the right, building our role, our thinking will become correct as well. Okay. Another aspect of this is think about what is our purpose. Do everything with a purpose. If you're doing, drink a coffee, what's the purpose of drinking this? You're going to, browse on the internet or your phones now, right? Which is connected to the internet. But what's the purpose behind it? I want to watch this movie. What's the purpose behind it? So maybe the purpose is relaxation. Yes, we need that. But to what extent are we going to do so? Some kids, they play video games, but they play video game for 3-4 hours, and they completely forget they're playing video games for all night long. What's the purpose behind that? So one of the ways is correcting our, thinking about the purpose. Everything has been given a purpose. Human beings have a purpose. What's the purpose within these actions as well? Inshallah, we'll continue this talk next week, but from a different angle. Inshallah, what I want to do here is get some feedback from everybody here. Maybe if you have a question, I'll welcome a question. But what I would really like to hear is one takeaway from everybody here. So, you guys attended before? First time? So we've been doing it on a regular basis. We ask everybody their takeaways. So what is your takeaways? These guys always participate. Inshallah, maybe you can participate as well. Give us, whoever wants to go first. What is one takeaway, or maybe you have a question? Who would like to go first? Go ahead, brother.
To not just understand Surah Al-Fatiha, but to feel the Surah Al-Fatiha.
I would put it the other way. Not just to feel it, but to purely understand it.
Yeah.
Right? I'll put it from that angle. Yeah. Okay? Because, the Imam recited beautifully. Okay? A feeling comes in. Okay? But we need to understand, are we being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, what are we being grateful towards? Okay? When we say, Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, is it about the feeling that comes in? No, Ihdina, we're asking Allah. Oh Allah, guide us. So we should have that understanding. Jazakallah khairan. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, in another part we said to read Quran, not just for example, just to look for leadership or science or money or marriage, just read Quran like fresh, just open eyes and everything.
And that will bring the truest guidance, right? And what's the purpose of reciting and memorizing the Quran? So you can actually pray in tahajjud. So you can have complete focus on it, not on a book. Okay? And yes, if you, for tahajjud for example, majority of the scholars will say, you can have mushaf open as you're reading tahajjud. Anything that is sunnah, you can do that except for the Prophet Salah. But if we truly contemplate on the Quran, right? While praying in front of Allah, standing in front of Him, we'll start to realize the purity of it. We'll start to see the consistency of it. And then we will realize, what does Allah truly want from us? Okay, great. Jazakallah khair with it. You want to go back to you? Go ahead.
To live in a mindset paradigm of gratitude.
Okay, living under the gratitude. Okay, and this will correct all of our thinking. Great one. Okay, anyone else? Go ahead, brother.
Think positively on everything that the Quran says. We think normally, why is this haram? Why is this haram? Why is this haram? But if we think that it is beneficial for you, and when Allah asks us to do something, it's something good for us, and we have to abide by it.
And that's a great point, right? That we need to think positively about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the thing here is, when you truly think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the purity of Surah Fatiha, when you think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Rabb, the one who takes care of you, the one who created you, the one you're living right now, you're alive right now, then we start to understand this is a Rabb of mercy. He is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Yes, there's a day of judgment. Yes, there's accountability. Yes, He has full ownership on that day, but He created us out of mercy. Once we understand that, again, thinking is required, understanding is required. Once we understand that, every rule that comes to us, there's benefit in it. There's mercy in it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think Surah Luqman, Huda wa Rahma. This Quran is guidance and it's a mercy. One of the biggest things to think about is how people are lost without the Quran itself. Are we thinking about that? Great comment, brother. Jazakallah khairan. Brother, would you like to?
Yes. First of all, learn the Islamic, learn the things, and then start implementing those learning. Before doing that, do your own due diligence and research, so that you know what is right, what is wrong. And if you believe in that, if you do your research and once you completely understand that, then start implementing.
Jazakallah khair. That's amazing. Learn, but do your due diligence and understanding those things as well. Are we just following a tradition? Are we just following a culture? Or this is what the Prophet ﷺ actually brought to us? Or this is what the Quran actually wants from us? We have to. That's a great comment. I want you to speak up as well.
So like, for example, you have the whole Quran memorized, but like, you don't understand anything in it. So there's less value, and it's kind of like you're reading a book, but instead of like understanding it.
I completely get where you're going with this. Okay? And this is an issue. Quran is meant to be understood. Okay? And this is critical for us, that we need to read. And by the way, yes, not everybody is an Arabic speaker. Not everybody is an Arabic speaker at the level of the Sahaba. And the Quran, I'll mention this next week, but the Quran, the Arabic required over the Quran is the Arabic that the Sahaba spoke. And the people of that time period spoke. And so, yes, not everybody is going to speak at that level. But you know what? If you're picking up one word here, one word here, one word here, eventually we'll start understanding it. Okay? For example, something very simple, taqwa. Okay? When you look at the self, meaning this is your morphology in an Arabic language, you realize taqwa is going to come from ittaqa, okay? Which is coming from the root form of ifti'al, which requires effort. Okay? So taqwa, someone say, I have taqwa. But are you putting an effort in there? It's not something easy. Taqwa is something going to require effort. Okay? And so once you understand that meaning, taqwa is going to come throughout the Quran, every single chapter. And so you understand that already. Okay? But now you complement that with your translation. Okay, here the taqwa comes. I'm not going to take the fearing of Allah, but it's broader than that now. You have the full connotation as well. Okay? So we slowly build ourselves up to understand that. Brothers?
I would say ground our thinking in religion, like any aspect of life we are thinking, we need to ground that in religion. Like we need to connect it with our with Islam in every aspect of life. Whatever we are thinking, that should be connected with the Islam. So
Jazakallah khair, mother. And this is what Salah is, right?
Exactly.
This is the whole point. Meaning our topic is this: how do we correct every single action? We correct it by thinking about every single action. And what is taqwa? The effort that is required. Is this action correct or is this action incorrect? But I know you want to say
Yeah,
something.
sure. There are a few things which you also forced me thinking through the entire speech. Like when you come from certain profession, like when you study of all your course about leadership or about the psychology, you don't study Quran from that perspective alone. You need to unlearn what you have done, study in a new way, what it has been explained in the way it has to be studied. Similarly, like I study these days I'm a lot more into like artificial intelligence. That's what I was just thinking when I was hearing you, like how Quran predicts the explained in a way that how Qiyamah, the science of Qiyamah is mentioned, and how the future, what was Prophet Sallallahu mentioned 1400 years back, how humans live in certain period of time, which we have been seeing what's happening now. So just thinking the like similar way, like in artificial intelligence, like we do the predictive modeling, how the things get predicted now. Maybe it's very good way I speak. I don't know. It's if it's not. I am not the father of a kid who's like 87 and a half years old. I was just thinking if this technology is not utilized or explained to our generation the right way, I'm telling you, it's a bit more disaster than the social media. Social media is nothing in what AI is creating. Since last 1 year, it's been creating. It is in the boom. The kind of the applications it has been created now in a way the artificial intelligence is created. It's more for a work to get the work done in a very faster way and smoother. But the implications towards in a negative way, I don't know if I think if you really feel fear how the future generation looks like. I don't know, seriously, it's a
this is
disaster.
and I think this is why we need to create this independent thinking alongside with it.
I know. The thing, what's happening is, once you get into that mode, for me, like in this age, I'm getting addicted. Like, though it's my part of my work, like, for instance, I don't write emails anymore. I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
I have set up a automated reply system in my own personal way that most of my emails get replied automatically.
Okay.
So it's like this is something basic.
Yeah.
In a productivity you can use it, but if you see in a negative aspects, I don't know what's going to happen. How are we going to protect our kids from that?
So maybe you need to do the thinking on our behalf
yeah, seriously.
and go blindly copy you to give us some solutions.
That's the point. They are taking the thinking from our head.
Yeah.
They are thinking,
They are making us don't think.
exactly.
We are giving you everything, don't think.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's really
Hussein
dangerous.
has mentioned the right word, thinking. I don't know, now if I want to do anything innovative in my own way, I don't do it. Like if you want me to do study a report, which is 40 pages, I don't do it anymore because there's certain apps which gives me the
summary points.
I do the prompt.
Yeah.
What I want from this report.
Yeah.
Okay, that gives me explanation in less than 30 seconds. My mind is not going to think in a new way. I'm just following a machine. I have to follow. I don't know. I'm really.
But
Well, you mentioned things which we don't think about it deeply. You mentioned the organs in ourselves. Allah said in Quran, Surah Al-Zumar, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. We don't feel it until we lose it. And that's the problem. We have to think that it's valuable before and we protect it as Allah gave us. But we don't do that. Like I asked for a person who lost his kidney, he was going for dilation every week, 3 times. And then he got a kidney, he built it and get transplant. And I said, what was your experience on this? He said, you don't know about Allah's ni'mah except when you lose it. That's a big thing.
And I think that's a big thing we need to consider. How much ni'mah we actually have. We're not thinking, and how much problems this creates. Right? That we're always ungrateful. And we're always looking at, the whole thing, grass is greener on the other side. We're always looking at other blessings, not realizing how much blessings we have over ourselves. Okay, but I know you had your hands up again now. We can make the last comment.
Just have a question.
Sure.
When did you start public speaking, and what advice would you give to a future public speaker?
Can we talk about that afterwards? Okay, well, once we complete, then we can talk.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The question was, when do we start?
When did you start public speaking?
When did I start public speaking? Okay, we'll address that afterwards. How's that? Okay.
And the second question was, and what makes you?
What advice would you give to a future public speaker?
Inshallah, we'll talk about it afterwards. Okay. So inshallah, I'll end it here. We can have a conversation after that. I can stay back. Subhanaka